Well, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Welcome to Joe Cioffi Weather Show. We are without Joe Rayo this morning, although I have the line open up for him. You can see it right up there in the upper left. So if he's within earshot, or if he's even awake, uh, just join in. Now, tried to do my live stream last night, and once again, I had an issue with the internet service provider slowing down the signal. Not only could I not get the live stream going, but I also couldn't send out emails with any kind of files. I couldn't. I was having trouble uploading images to my websites and to Patreon and everything else. So it makes for a very frustrating time. Something about the only time it seems to have happened is during the hours of 6 p.m. on, and it's been mostly on Thursdays and Fridays. Didn't happen on Thursday this week, but Thursday the stream. I actually because we I took Thursday off, so maybe I never really set it up. So I don't know if it didn't work on Thursday either. But once again on a Friday evening and then Saturday morning, everything is working fine. So let's see how it goes today. Now you've got uh, Groundhog Day tomorrow and Super Bowl Sunday. So I think the most important thing is, of course, if you're having a Super Bowl party, you want to make sure that you have all the right foods. So, given that the groundhog will be done once we get past sunup tomorrow, there are a number of great ways that you can prepare groundhog for your guests. And one is, and this is I'll just bring up this one in particular. This is from foodrepublic.com. And the person wants to make full disclosure here by saying this is not the first groundhog he's ever eaten. He advises that you should remove the musk glands in the armpits of the groundhog. Otherwise, you're going to be throwing up from the smell of braised musk glands as they boil away. And the only other thing he suggests is if you have difficulty finding or shooting a groundhog, you can substitute 2 rabbits or 6 pounds of chicken. So it's an interesting recipe mix here for chicken because I mean it has garlic, onions, reduced sodium chicken broth, good because we don't want to get your blood pressure going. Lots of garlic, which I like, thyme, that works, butter, Dijon mustard, and whole grain mustard seed. 1 cup, a quarter cup of whole grain mustard. I'm not sure what that is, but nonetheless, if you are interested in really surprising your guests for the Super Bowl tomorrow, uh, check out some of the more interesting recipes that are out there. There's also a grilling version of this. So look, I this is usually probably at the point in the world we live in today where I'm going to probably wind up getting some nasty messages and about bringing this up. A, it's a joke. B, I don't care. All right, so let's leave it at that. Don't waste your time commenting on. If you're watching this video on the replay, don't waste your time commenting about what a horrible person I am because I really don't care. So here we go. Let's roll with weather, and believe it or not, there's actually some weather going on after what's been a really quiet, uneventful week over much of the country. We've got winter storm watches up for a good portion of the West, particularly from the Rockies westward, Wyoming. Now, this might be a pretty good snow event for Wyoming here, Utah. And we've got winter weather advisories up for northeastern Nevada. A lot of areas in the west showing wind advisories or high wind watches or warnings. And we also have flood watches that are continuing, flash flood watches that continue on up into Washington state. So it kind of tells you see all this action coming in a broad area in the western part of the United States. You can figure out where the trough is. And in terms of the relative stableness of the atmosphere in the east, About the only thing exciting that's happening this morning, if you want to call it that, is the dense fog advisories that are up for southern New Jersey, southeastern Pennsylvania, and into parts of northwestern Virginia. There's certainly a feel of early spring weather in a lot of the eastern part of the United States, and that's only going to expand a bit as we move into next week. The satellite loop this morning. You can see the east. Probably in the east, if you've got a lot of weather systems running around. We talked about this week where you've got this energy that's coming out of the southwest. You see the rain and clouds moving over Florida and off the southeast coast. There's another upper air trough that's swinging across the lakes. The phasing with this didn't really take place close enough where it would be producing a big issue here today. Obviously, it's not cold enough for any kind of snow. Meanwhile, you're seeing the jet expand in the west and bringing in moisture to the Pacific Northwest, and that's starting the stage for what we were talking about here. Rain this morning across central Florida and moving northeastward, and of course, you're also seeing some showers in parts of South Carolina. Off the Virginia and coast of the Delmarva Peninsula, there's a second band of precip back through West Virginia and northeast Kentucky. Now, that probably will move through my neck of the woods, eastern PA to southern New England, sometime during tonight. Not everybody's going to get into that. And after that, I think weather conditions will improve somewhat. This is by no means going to be a picture perfect weekend because we've got a lot of work to do in getting all these clouds out of the way, and it's going to be a tough sell. And typically in early spring, and during the winter months, certainly we've seen it here in my neck of the woods that when we have these above normal temperatures, it also comes with a lot of clouds, and it's no fun. If you're going to be above normal, at least try to do it with a little bit of sunshine, but not happening. So let's look at the snow potential here regarding what we're seeing for the West. And Wyoming looks like to be the big winner here, where we're talking about a fairly large area of a foot or more, and even some 2 foot amounts showing up west southwest of Billings, Montana. So even to southwestern Montana, seeing the possibility of some big snows, especially in the higher ranges, and continuing up north and west of there. Still fairly busy, but not quite as busy in the Pacific Northwest, seeing some snow being indicated here, and probably even for some of the lower elevations over the next couple of days. With the deep trough coming into the western part of the United States, it's probably going to bring snow levels down to some lower elevations. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And as far as the Northeast is concerned, and over through the Great Lakes, looking at a coating to a couple of inches, we do have a bit of a warm front that's setting up for tomorrow night, and that might produce a few bursts of snow on up to the north. Nothing to write home about here. We're talking 1 to 4 inch snow amounts. It's no big deal. And a little bit of lake effect going on, thrown in the mix as well, producing a coating to a couple of inches. Again, no real big deal here. Weather Prediction Center surface map, we've got a low this morning east of North Carolina, a flat wave that's running east of 40 and 70. Not much of a high behind it. There's actually another weak low that's analyzed back through West Virginia and eastern Kentucky. And then you've got this warmer flow across southern Canada. Look at this warm front that is moved up into southwestern Canada with temperatures that have jumped up into the mid and upper 40s in some places. So this is I guess, the initial setting of the table of the winter storm that's going to follow. But you've got low pressure across Canada. You don't have high pressure across Canada, and that's not good for cold air. It just isn't. You're seeing low lack of big highs coming down or forming in Western Canada, at least for now, and that is really problematic as far as the weather is concerned for snow in the I-95 urban corridor. I do tend to think, though, as we go through this week, particularly for upstate New York and central and northern New England, that the pattern may not be too bad as far as snow or freezing precipitation, frozen precipitation, or all of the above. Now, here's a look. I set it at 4 inches or more on the probability over the next 72 hours of at least 4 inches by from the Weather Prediction Center. So this is from now up until Tuesday morning. And Wyoming, the big winner here, with a near 95% or higher probability over a good chunk of the state. And then we are looking at uh, also some high probabilities up in the Pacific Northwest and on up into parts of Idaho and into southern Montana. In the east, there you go. Whoa. Really have to zero in on northeastern New York up into the Adirondacks for a whopping 20% probability of at least 4, and northernmost Vermont and New Hampshire. When you lower it down to at least 2 inches, gives you a little bit more room to work with. You're looking at a few areas showing a probability of as much as 60 to 80% in the blue areas. Actually, 50 to 80% in the blue areas. A probability of at least 2 inches. So you just can't buy snowstorms this winter, just the way it is. And also, I should point out, as I mentioned earlier, with regards to the longer range from WPC, it's kind of interesting here because they're showing a probability of at least a quarter of an inch of liquid. And this is the time frame for Thursday into Friday. And as I said, for later this week, central and northern New England looks like a good bet. They have a 10% risk down to about northern New Jersey to just touching New York City. And then as we go into the period for next Friday, they've kind of arched it up a little bit, but bringing it 10% down to the lower Hudson Valley and northern Pennsylvania north of I-80, and that darker green 30 to 50% for upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and into Maine. I think we're going to see those numbers north of I-90 go up. The weather pattern is setting up. Now, I don't have the new teleconnections yet, but this was from yesterday, and this is ugly. Okay, it's just darn ugly. You've got the PNA, the Pacific North America Index, is going back to very strong negative readings, especially around mid-month. So this is at least telling you the deep trough and we always remember that we're talking about large geographic areas when we say the west or the east. So ultimately, the bottom line is, from the standpoint of the day-to-day forecast, is exactly where that trough is. Is it at 80? Is it at 90? Is it 110? Is it at 120? This all makes a huge difference. Even though you can't just broadly say we have a negative reading of this index and a positive reading of that index, therefore this is what the outcome is going to be. It just doesn't work that way. But we've got a negative PNA that gets very, very strong. The North Atlantic oscillation is about as ugly as you can get. It is forecast to not only go positive, but anything over 200 to me is off the wall positive. And that means that the Atlantic is about as absent of any kind of blocking that you could that could be. And also, the NAO being so strongly positive means that we have a pretty fast flow. So weather systems are going to be moving along rather quickly. That means that if, in the event that there's a cold high that builds into the Northeast, particularly for the interior Northeast, it's not going to hang around very long because it's going to move out because it has to with an NAO this negative. Now, here's the one thing that makes it a little different. If we go back to a few weeks ago when we had all the indices in a basically horrible, horrible setup, and that's when we saw temperatures up in the 50s and 60s all the way up into upstate New York north of I-90. What's a little different this time around is we have a collapsing EPO that goes from off the wall positive, which is where we are now, to neutral, and then it goes strongly negative. So that at least changes the look. That negative turn is that trend to negative, and the time frame that I would look at would be where it goes to neutral there. That big change down to the neutral position centers on February 6th. The NAO, we don't care. The PNA's already told us, but look around February 6th. That's probably where we are, where the models are actually in a series of waves that are going to be moving through the eastern half of the United States as we go through this week. The one for the end of the week will likely be the one that's the strongest of the bunch, and may have the most cold air to work with. Again, this is going to be as you go north. So for the urban corridor from Washington to Philadelphia to New York City to Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City, Hartford, Providence, Boston. This is not for you. Okay, this is not going to be cold enough for you. So let's roll along and take a look at where this is all going to be ending up this week, and we'll start with our beautiful upper air maps from last night. I'm going to use the 6C GFS, and we'll also look at the 0Z European model run. So what's happening is, of course, as we look here in the east, we're trying to work through this trough that is going to be coming through tonight. The upper trough is, and it basically went from this wrapped up, cut off mega storm that the models were showing on several runs back days and days and days ago to just a pretty simple, straightforward non-event. It's amazing why you can't really um, you just can't dive in head first when you see these models do certain things, especially when they tug on your emotions. If you're a snow lover and you want to see it, something of consequence happen. Look what the models were forecasting back well over a week ago, and look what it's turned out. And in the meantime, the one thing that it has in a broad sense, it has gone and it continues to get correct, is the fact that all your cold air is locked up in the Arctic. There is no teleconnection of any kind where you're seeing a flow running from like this. Okay, nothing like that. So your ultra cold air is still locked way up, and that is not good. You are, as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday. Now, of course, this is where you're starting to deal with these weather systems and the troughing that's coming into the west. You do actually start to see at this point there is a cold connection here, but it's coming down from Alaska and Western Canada down into the western part of the United States. So here's your upper trough that's getting kicked out to the east. There's a bit of a connection here, though, into the Great Lakes. So that's your negative EPO that's starting to come into play. And that is probably going to allow for some colder air and higher pressures to build across southeastern Canada. The problem is that over time, you lose this, okay? You do have a little bit of you have a ridge that runs from the Atlantic northwestward into Greenland. So that actually is going to help to hold the high in place. This is at the point where the NAO has not quite gone super positive yet. Okay, it's if you look back at the teleconnections again, these were the teleconnections from yesterday. I don't have the new ones from today, but from yesterday, your NAO is from yesterday is kind of neutralish for the next couple of days, and then it starts to really spike up. I suspect that looking at what I'm seeing here, it's probably neutral for a little long for when the new indices come out a little later this morning. Hopefully they do. You'll see that I'm going to guess that neutral line, just judging from what the upper air looks like here, that neutral line is going to be extended a little bit. So we might not see the NAO as crazy off the wall, at least initially. It may still get to be, it probably will get to be crazy off the wall anyway in the longer term. And as we swing this around, of course, you'll notice the flow in Canada is still pretty much west to east. There is some colder flow that's coming down, but it's coming down more into the plains and back through the Great Lakes. And of course, you've got the upper low in this trough over Lake Huron, and this is by the time we get to the end of the week. And then riding it further, notice that the action across the North Atlantic is horrible. Okay, I mean this is just awful for the NAO. Okay, it just got this mega fast flow with you want higher pressures up in this region here for the NAO to go negative, and in fact um, you have super low pressure in some instances there. It gets a little bit better toward the end. You start to swing around a deep trough out in the west, but look at what's happening here in the eastern part of the United States, right there. Okay, what is that? Southeast ridge. Okay, not that it flies all the way up, but it does pose a problem here because with cold air. And again, if your flow across the Atlantic is still pretty fast, your cold air with highs that are going to try to come in will move out rather quickly. And as always, when we get to the end of the forecast period, what do we have? We have a much colder looking GFS and Jetstream. This never happens. It has done this. We've seen this for the last 4 weeks or more, where the models continue to just go to a much better looking pattern at the end of the forecast period. It has not occurred. And by the way, look at the date here. Okay, on the 384 hour. The date now is February 17th. So it's already past the mid-month time frame, and that is really problematic. You just, what are you going to do with this? It's horrible. Okay, there is no sign, none, zero, of any kind of change in the overall scheme of things. By the way, I want to just point out this was something I didn't really spend a whole lot of time uh, bringing attention to this, but one of the things that I did notice, and this was kind of funny, just kind of looking at that 10 millibar level, talking about the stratosphere and stratospheric warming events and splitting of the polar vortex. We've had this wrapped up polar vortex over the Arctic region, and that's been reflected in what's going on at lower levels of the atmosphere with all the cold air that's been locked up there. There was an attempt for this thing to split, and then all it really does is just kind of get reinforced. This was uh, the GFS actually back about a week or so ago was very bullish about breaking down this whole situation. Not that it necessarily would have translated down into the lower levels of the atmosphere, but uh, again, it just completely backed off and went to same old, same old. And I've said many times, the trend is your friend. Okay, the trend is your friend, and in this case, for snow lovers, the trend is your enemy, because we are locked in this really just absolutely unrelenting pattern that refuses to break down. All patterns break down. This one will break down. Obviously, it's going to last. Normally they last. Most patterns will hang around for several weeks before they adjust or flip. Sometimes you get them to last for 5 or 6 weeks, and then every once in a while you get into a situation like this where it almost feels like we're going to carry this through well into the first part of March. Don't be shocked if we wind up taking this all the way through February and into March. Take a look at the surface map here on the GFS, by the way. Nothing but low pressure across southern Canada. Awful, just absolutely awful. And then as we move eastward, of course, you're starting to see your storm in the west taking shape, pretty wrapped up low there into Colorado that drops down into New Mexico. And meanwhile, in the east, of course, after Monday, which will warm things up with a west northwest wind, I think temperatures will be in the 50s and 60s. Might see some 70-degree readings if we get enough sunshine into Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. I think we could easily see 60 in New York City if we get enough sun. Now, there is a bit of a front here that comes close on Tuesday. It doesn't quite get there to the urban corridor anyway. Sort of makes it to Boston barely. And we do have, and this is the beginnings of your negative EPO at play. So we do have do have some cold air here. All right, there's your high, and just kind of missed printing out an H. There's a back door. There's a front here that kind of runs up like this, and that first push is going to get hung up. It's going to wait for this wave that moves out of Texas and runs up into Kentucky and then kind of slides to the east. Notice on the northwest side, because there's a little bit of cold air, but not a lot, you got this band of snow and sleet well up into northwest PA and western New York. That wave goes out. Second wave on Wednesday follows. Now, in this situation, you've got more of a high, not a whole lot more, but there's more of a high in southeastern Canada. So that'll probably allow cold air to bleed further south. I don't think it's going to bleed far enough south to cause any problems for the urban cities, but this could be setting up maybe for some snow and sleet and freezing rain for northern Pennsylvania and through upstate New York and interior New England. The model has the GFS at least takes a 97 low to Pittsburgh and then attempts to redevelop it to the east. And then it's got one more wave to follow along about Thursday and Thursday night. And of course, after the second wave goes by, the second low goes by, if it goes by that far west, it actually drags a warm front northward. And then you get a third wave that gets through here for Thursday into Friday. Not, again, the negative EPO is at least going to make it colder across the northern tier. But you've got issues when you've got freezing rain being indicated on the model clear up into northern Maine. So there really isn't a whole lot of hope here. There's some kind of diver next weekend that drops down into the lower lakes and makes for a little low. Even this one can't even produce snow of any consequence down near the coast. And then, the long range is what the long range is. Just want to really quick take a look. I didn't look at the European from last night, so I have no idea what it did. So we'll look at it together. And then I will come back to the chat board. Well, this is a little interesting. Let's see what this is. Well, that's interestingly enough for just seeing from that first look. Europeans got a much colder look all the models always have a colder look at day 10. So I don't know that it means anything. Same idea here in the upper air. It does seem to get to a bit of a colder looking scenario here by days 8, 9, and 10 on the European. I would really caution putting any faith in this. I mean, this high building up into the northwest is interesting enough. I mean, this actually probably to an extent, when I'm looking at this would probably be a PNA index that's not quite as positive, as negative as what we saw from the GFS from yesterday. Uh, the ridge in the east is a lot flatter. There's a colder look here with the jet coming down out of Canada into the northeast, down into the mid-Atlantic states. You got a trough down near 160, so that's always a good thing to see for troughs in the east, and you've got some energy down in the southwest. So let's just really fast. Let's see how this all played out on the surface. Use it on this view. Okay, so there's your. This is only in 24-hour increments. I'm not going to have time to kind of review it on pivotal weather this morning, but here's your the European actually has this is Monday evening. If you want to believe it, the European actually has that backdoor front much further to the south here Monday evening, unlike the GFS, which is a bit, makes things a bit different and builds more of that high in for Tuesday into Wednesday. So you got this high up here. Here's your low, bit of a frontal boundary like this. The trough is so far west. That low has got to, at least according to the European, will probably be a primary up the west side of the Appalachians. Don't see why I would argue against that. Hang on, let me just get rid of this. And well, there you go. You got a 980 low sitting in western New York. That would be a solid Great Lakes snow event, and maybe even some snows for Chicago out of something like this. Then up it goes into eastern Canada. You've got a high that builds in, So by the end of the period, you're actually just on the cold side and dry. Just want to see what the anomalies are. Yeah, so interestingly enough, at the end of this week, so you've got basically above normal temperatures for most of this week. Kind of tempers a little bit as you head into midweek with that back door. Then, of course, you get a warm front that comes all the way up. Cold air next weekend. Wait for a more important weather front to go through here. And then, of course, by day 10, it's always perpetually below normal across virtually the entire United States. All right. So, look, the bottom line is remain skeptical. Okay. Just remain skeptical. Whatever you wind up seeing going forward here, I think that's probably the wisest approach to weather. If you're a snow lover in my neck of the woods anyway, you need to get on a plane and go out west. I mean, that really is your only solution, unless you want to go way up in upstate New York and take your chances that it works out for central and northern New England. I just don't. There's nothing. There is nothing when a pattern locks in the way this one has, and it's as horrible as this one has been for snow lovers. There's really not much you're going to be able to do with this. So that is pretty much it as far as weather goes. I would just say, by the way, the one thing you'll just have to look for, and I'm still waiting to see. Bill Uber, you can't even buy a couple of snow flurries in a pattern like this. Uh, what you are going to hope to see if you are in a snow lover, and that is you're going to have to hope that a window opens up where everything times out perfectly. I just don't see how you're going to take this whole pattern and just suddenly flip it of the whole 180 degrees to get it to something that is more favorable. I just don't see it. The trend is your friend. It's hard to break down the primary pattern, and it's kind of been like this since December 19th, 20th. That's when I would mark the beginning of this pattern we've been in. And then we changed halfway. The pattern actually did change into the first part of January. It just changed to something horrible. It was, we went from a bad pattern to another bad pattern. And that's why I always say the pattern change you want and the pattern change you get are two different things. And Howard Vanderhoff, you got that right. The fat lady is in the building. She is getting ready. She's in her getting ready to go into her dressing room and preparing to sing. Okay. I think that's a fair assessment. And I'm the type of person that really does not usually give up on a winter in a bad pattern. I still would leave open the possibility of a window appearing somewhere along the line. But uh, I when it's like this, it is it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough to even try to hold on to some faith for snow lovers. It's just not there. It's just not there. So that pretty much sums it up for today. Now we will do our Sunday morning coffee with Cioffi and Rayo, as it has become. So that'll be at 11 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow, and we'll see what happens. Let me just see if the teleconnections have updated yet. They sometimes update as early as 10 a.m., but they did not. So probably between now and noon. I'd be curious to see what the snapshot was off the 0Z run and leave it at that. And I'm just going to take a quick look here at the NAM to see if there's anything remotely exciting other than the fact that there's a warm front coming through tonight with probably some snow for parts of upstate New York and into New England before the very warm air arrives. So we're going to, go from temperatures at least with the warm front as we transition over with readings 50s and 60s that are going to set up for Monday. And I don't know about Tuesday because Tuesday may depend on the position of the backdoor front and some clouds. Although when I'm looking at the NAM, the European might be a little bit too aggressive in the southern extent of that frontal boundary. So it may have to wait until the first wave goes by before anything happens. All right, so everybody have a great day. Thankfully, I had a signal, no interruptions. It all worked out well. And we'll see you tomorrow morning, okay? And just look for uh, Weather in 5, which I usually do in the morning. I'm going to do it this afternoon. So we'll update everything after all the new models come out, and I'll do a quick Weather in 5. And also, be sure you got the free weather app, the meteorologist Joe Cioffi weather app, Angry Ben's weather app, the Angry Weatherman. You can download those on Google Play or on the App Store. We're getting close to the app, the Apple version of Angry Ben's weather app. So hopefully in the next few weeks. I actually was hoping to have it before the winter started, but being that the winter's been pretty much a non-event, not having it hasn't made any real difference. So you didn't miss much, in other words. But hopefully we'll have it ready to go in the next couple of weeks. All right. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.